this. Rina Shah is a political strategist and commentator, and Luke Broadwater is the New York Times congressional correspondent. Very good to have you both with us, Luke and Rina. Good evening to you both. So we have these conflicting decisions that we've seen from these various states. It's getting a bit confusing, but Luke, starting with you, what do you think, looking at the reaction from the Trump camp as well, the impact has been so far?
Right. Well, Trump is obviously using these rulings to try to rally support around him. He often likes to portray himself as under attack by the judiciary, by the courts, to try to rally his base to send him more money for his campaign. He's had some success with rallying his base behind him in the past when there's been adverse court decisions. Ultimately, this case is going to have to be decided by the Supreme Court because there are conflicting court rulings in different states. You can see how it could be very, very bad for Donald Trump if he's kicked off the ballot in state after state after state. And so the Supreme Court is going to have to decide, does the 14th Amendment apply to Donald Trump's conduct? Is he, in fact, an insurrectionist who does not deserve to be on the ballot?
Rina, do you agree this ultimately has to be decided by the Supreme Court?
Find the cases in Colorado and Maine to be very clear-cut. And I think constitutional conservatives should be cheering these decisions, actually, because they're rooted in legality, in the U.S. Constitution. That is the reason given here. And for Colorado, of course, it was the Supreme Court there, so jurists. And then in Maine, it was unilaterally decided by the Secretary of State. If we're a nation of laws, the laws on the book should apply to states doing what they wish, expressing the will of their people to have who they believe should be on the ballot and should not be on their ballot. The very complicating matter here is the concept of federalism, which always seems to complicate our politics. It's that division between the federal government and the state government. And in the aftermath of these two decisions that have both been extremely recent, what I continue to hear from Republicans who actually don't even support Trump is that voters should decide at the ballot box, not jurists, not bureaucrats. But again, I say that this is a decision in which states can do what they wish to do. And then, of course, the Supreme Court could choose to take these cases up or they could choose not to. But again, it's about the will of the people, and the laws on the books have said the Secretary of State in Maine can make this decision and the Supreme Court of Colorado can make this decision, again, rooted in the 14th Amendment.
Luke, I just want to get your thought on that, because we also spoke with the Maine Secretary of State last night after the decision, and she said that she felt duty-bound by precisely her state's laws. But at the same time, Republican voters and Republicans are saying this is disenfranchising voters.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can make a good argument that if you read the plain text of the 14th Amendment, which I think, she did, and also the court in Colorado did, that this applies very clearly to Donald Trump, and that if you have an evidentiary hearing and you hear the facts of what happened on January 6th and the build up to it, that he should be disqualified. That said, a lot of people don't like the politics of that, right? They think the voters should decide about who can be on the ballot, who should be the next president. And so if this does get decided by the Supreme Court, which I think eventually the Supreme Court is going to have to rule on this, they are going to have to weigh that textual reading of the Constitution against a decision that will be wildly unpopular with many Republicans and many people who think the voters should determine whether Trump is the next president, not the courts.
And Rina, one more question on this. As Luke had mentioned earlier, is this all just going to benefit the former president, Donald Trump?
Donald Trump being disqualified from certain states' ballots actually doesn't help him at all. If he does go on to be the GOP's nominee, which after mid-March, there is a point of no return. If nobody else in the GOP primary field can do the delegate math, basically catch up to Trump at that point, then he becomes the presumptive nominee going into the summer convention. Look, this is a situation which I believe our founding fathers built in the mechanism within the 14th Amendment to leave out a person that they felt had engaged in insurrection, that activity, to not be able to be eligible to lead the country. I don't see how this is so controversial. And there are many people who are saying this, we're already in the waters of a constitutional dilemma here. I don't believe it to be so. Again, this can get kicked up to the Supreme Court. They can make a decision there which would overturn a state's decision.
Okay.
Now, pulling back for a moment, to me, it's really important to realize the politics of here. One big thing is that the same people that were applauding the Supreme Court's decision to kick the issue of abortion back to the states, these are the same people now saying the states should not be able to disqualify Trump from the ballot. It doesn't make sense. It's a bit hypocritical. I think it's very look at the Constitution.
All right, we'll have to see what the Supreme Court does. But I want to ask you both about a very different topic, foreign policy. I know it doesn't often play a very consequential role in presidential elections, but if you look at what's happening right now with the Israel-Gaza war, it's been deeply divisive here in the U.S. And we're just pulling up a poll here from the New York Times and Siena College from last week. It shows that voters broadly disapprove of President Biden's handling of the conflict. So, Luke, I want to start with you because, in general, this has been a question that has deeply divided Democrats as well, hasn't it?
Right. So Biden's in a very tough place here politically. The Democratic Party is very much divided about how to respond to the war in Gaza. President Biden has been a very staunch supporter of Israel. And there are a lot of people in the Democratic base who believe he should insist on some restraints on Israel, that there shouldn't be the type of bombing that's going on in Gaza right now, where so many innocent people are getting killed. And so there's a divide there on the Democrats. On the Republican side, they're going to be opposed to what Biden's doing no matter what. So that's why you see his poll number so low on the issue of the war in Gaza. Republicans are almost uniformly against him no matter what. And then there's the divide among the Democrats.
Rina, do you think this is going to end up hurting President Biden, as many people have been speculating, particularly among Arab American, Muslim American voters?
I already see this hurting Biden. Many of these Muslim voters have felt betrayed by Biden. These same voters feel that does the U.S. have to have Israel's back at every turn? And look, it would take a longer segment to get into that. But the reality is that you can be supportive of the Jewish community, of the Jewish people. You can be against what happened on October 7th, but you also don't have to be pro the actions of this Israeli government. And by that, I mean Netanyahu and his people. So there is a lot of gray area here. But for Muslim Americans, that betrayal is so severe. And I must say, we are more technologically connected to the ballot box than ever before. And in the same way, we are technologically connected to what's happening. And therefore, it really, really touches American hearts and minds in a way that you don't even have to be a Muslim American to feel the way you feel about how our administration has really failed us in not taking the proper steps, in being too supportive of Netanyahu in his actions in the aftermath of October 7th. This is something that Biden has to correct course on. And I don't find it that controversial to say that.
All right, well,
committed here are so severe on a daily basis.
Yeah, Rina, thank you. We'll have to see what the Biden administration decides to do on their policy here. But Rina, Luke, really good to get your thoughts tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The U.S.